Hey everybody, welcome back. I love when I get a chance to do a deep dive with one of our Biz Book Pub Hub partners because they have such a rich history of why they do what they do and the services they provide, the depth of thought that goes into why they're doing it and who they support. So stick around to learn more about this guest. And now, with any further delay, let me formally introduce the episode. I'm pleased to interview one of our BizBook Pub Hub partners. Our hub partners are experts who support entrepreneurs along their author journey. Today's guest brings a rare mix of marketing savvy, publishing know how, and strategic content expertise. She's spent decades helping everyone from Fortune 500 companies to entrepreneurs and thought leaders turn their ideas into books that make a real business impact. She's the founder of Leverage2Market Associates, the author of Marketing Above the Noise, and a member of the Million Dollar Consulting Hall of Fame. Whether she's coaching aspiring authors, shaping a manuscript, or helping a business owner figure out how their book fits into their brand, she brings clarity, insight, and a deep understanding of what makes content resonant. She also leads a team that supports authors through the entire publishing journey from writing and editing to production and design, ensuring the final result is not just polished, but powerfully positioned. Please join me in welcoming my good friend and editor, Linda Popky. Linda, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Robbie. I'm excited to be here. It's so wonderful to be here with you. Especially you have your own book that's percolating and coming out soon. So
Yeah, and
excited.
I'll share my 2 cents about our experience working together. It's now our third book of four that I have that we've worked together on. And I have to say, I didn't know as much about your background when I said yes the first time. I had some sense. We knew each other a little bit, but I feel like just the research I've done, the times we've gotten to know each other through the hub, I still don't know how you came to do this work though. Like, what's the journey that led to you working with authors?
So it's interesting. I've always been a writer, back from even when I was in elementary school, high school, I was writing things. I was editor of the high school newspaper. I worked on the college newspaper, but I went into marketing and advertising and PR, and I would be creating marketing pieces for others, whether it would be a news release or a piece of collateral or whatever. And over time, as I got into my own business about 22 years ago, I started to create more and more content. It was focused around content as opposed to other marketing types. And so I was creating white papers and websites, and as time and time went on, people were like, "Could you write this for me? Could you write this for me?" And so I wrote my own book in 2015. Excuse me, it's been about 10 years, which is amazing. But I wrote my own book. And then people started to come to me and they said, "Could you help with this? Could you edit this a little bit? Could you help with that?" And so next thing I know, I was editing books. I started to ghostwrite books for some of my clients. And then people said to me, I need help with this. If you could edit this, and how do I get this to market? What do I do with it now? So the next thing I knew, because I had been in marketing for decades and I understood production and I understood graphic design, so I got a graphic designer and we started laying out a book. And I brought somebody in who came out of the commercial publishing industry. So she knew exactly what to do. And then we got book designers and then we got the illustrators, etc. And then it was kind of like, well, can you get it on Amazon? Can you turn it into an ebook? Can you do an audiobook? And so that sort of evolved. Excuse me. And then what started to happen was kind of backtracking a little bit. People would come to me and say, "I have a great idea for a book, but I can't, I won't, I don't, this, whatever reason, I'm never going to get it out of my head into some kind of published format." And I said, "Okay, could you talk me through the idea?" "Well, yeah." So we would get on Zoom and I'd ask questions and I'd pull it out of them, kind of like, pulling on a rope a little bit. And then one of two things happened. Either we got the foundation and the structure of the book and they said, "Okay, I'm good. I could go run off and I can make this happen myself." Or they'd say, "Okay, we got so far. I'm not really comfortable as a writer. And so, Linda, can you write the book?" And so, how I got more into ghostwriting. So now I can do the whole process from book coaching all the way up into delivering and production. And not every client needs that. You don't need that whole thing. You don't need the coaching. You come to me, you have something written. Some clients just want to get the upfront part and they go somewhere else for production. Sometimes I've worked with people just on the book proposal to help them get it sold. So whatever you need, I meet you where you are. And the other thing that I do, having spent a lot of time in both the commercial world, the enterprise world, and the agency side as a consultant, running my own business, running a professional association. I come in and I read it for content. I don't just read for typos and commas and punctuation and grammar and all that. I read your book, as if I am your audience. So you will not see me editing a book on the history of Russian civilization because it's just not my thing. However, most of the books that I work on are business related, they're social issues, they're memoirs. It's not totally nonfiction. I don't work in fiction. And I come in and I read your book and I say, as someone who might buy your book, do I get this? Does this make sense? Because if it doesn't, I might say to you, chapter 4, Robbie, I think that needs to go before chapter 3 because otherwise it's not logical. Or in chapter 7, you kind of left me hanging. Or, and you don't do this, but some people just stop. It's almost like you hit the, traffic light and the light turns red and you stop and they don't end. So you want to end the book by, by finishing it up, by tying all the loose ends together, by telling me what's next. What should I do after I've read the book? What's my call to action? So I might say to you, where's all that? Again, you don't have that problem. But a
I have to
lot of
say,
authors do.
Linda, I'm suddenly having this moment of vulnerability, realizing that my book currently, as we're recording this, has just gone to the formatter and they're laying it out. And then you and I will do a final proofread. And I suddenly am having this like, oh my gosh, I will be an example. I will be an example of the thing not to do. But thank you. I enjoy working with you as well. And I want to just, before I talk about that experience, just the breadth of what you're able to offer people and the fact that you meet them where they are. Some of the hub partners, so you're one of our Biz Book Pub Hub partners,
Yep.
which means everybody who's a hub partner has been vetted by me that they provide a service specifically for entrepreneurs who are writing a book to help them grow their business, speaking, coaching, consulting, etc. And so clearly that's your lane, right? It's not just memoirs. You do a lot of books for people who are speakers and coaches and consultants and all that. And so some are like, I have a package, it's soup to nuts, and I really want to work with people the entire journey. And they're really a hybrid publisher. Like that's what they do. And it really is, in the very beginning, I'll get the book out of your head all the way through. I will publish it for you under my imprint, and I will manage that. And I will give you some marketing cues here or there. And then there are others who could do kind of the choose your own adventure, but they'd prefer to have a few packages. So it's hard because sometimes I'm, as the kind of concierge of the hub, I'm always trying to figure out who to send people to. So it's really helpful for me to know, like, one, the range is really wide. I think of you as the editor because that's the role I've put you in. But I also could have been using you to get my book designed, formatted. You helped me find, I had a very complicated book for book 3. And it was like, in my head, I was like, this is like a for dummies book with all the like little sidebar notes and all the pop outs and call outs and the images and just that like technical stuff. And I didn't know anyone who had that skill set at the time. And you found me a great person, and we whipped that book together. Like, I mean, I never want to go through that experience again. Neither do you, but
speed. It was fast.
it was fast and technical. So I had 2 of my team members that I had trained on using Zoom do the technical review. You were reading it as the end user who uses Zoom to run events, who doesn't necessarily know all the technical pieces. So I had to think carefully about who to bring in for different pieces of that. But the thing you just said is, there are 3 kinds of editors. And I'd love you to actually talk about the different types of editors, because you kind of blend. You kind of can't help yourself but blend a little bit of it. But what are the different ways people can use someone just called an editor?
Okay, so there's and again, and you're right, editor is kind of this broad range. And there's really, it does break down into 3 areas. And I come in and sometimes I do a little bit of this, a little bit of that. To start at the almost finished end, what people think of sometimes as an editor, which is really kind of more of just a proofreader, someone who comes in at the end and you've written the book, you're ready to go. You want to make sure that the grammar's right and the punctuation's right. There aren't extra spaces or weird characters. That's kind of the least value add of editing. On the other end of the spectrum, we have the developmental editor, which is where someone says, I've got this book. It's sort of, here's the way the chapters go. And you haven't necessarily thought out, am I getting to the right audience? Do I have the messages correct? Is everything flowing well? And so there's a lot of that, which again, is probably the most work for an editor, because we're still, if you think about this building, we're still figuring out, are there 3 bedrooms or 4? Is it a full bath or a half a bath, right? So we kind of know we're building a house and it's going to have 3 or 4 bedrooms, whatever, but we haven't figured out where all the walls go. The editor's doing proofreading, is kind of doing the painting and touch up job, right? And in the middle is kind of the line editor, which says, okay, you've got the basics of the book done, but is it flowing? Are you repeating yourself? Using the same metaphor multiple times? Have you used the same case study multiple times? Do we use the same wording? Does it make sense? So it's kind of again, it's a spectrum, and people will put themselves on this, on this, on this. But I find very often people need either developmental editing or kind of line editing. The final editing, copy editing, proofreading, that's your finished work. So that's kind of when you're coming in and making sure that the house is painted and the carpet is laid correctly, etc. But if you don't have the walls in the right place, it's not going to be the house you want.
I love this metaphor so much. I've never heard this said before. I'm going to repeat it. I'm going to try to remember to credit you. What a cool idea, because again, like you could have a finished product that has beautiful carpeting, but if the wall's in the wrong place, there's no flow. Like when I bought my house, I was really interested in the flow because I was thinking about hosting parties, right? I was like, is there a good flow between the rooms? Like I had to have a vision before I knew whether it was the right place for me. And similarly, designing a book is like that. And that's where having someone is interesting. I've learned that having someone who is interested in your topic, but not an expert in your topic. This last go around, I'm gonna give a shout out to Sophie Lechner. She's one of my clients, one of the authors that I supported through her book launch, and she's a marketing expert. And she had just followed my sort of DIY online program, getting some support from me. She's also a member of my content and connection club. So she got some deep dive sessions, some like hot seats, I should say, during our masterminds. But she essentially ran her show with just kind of following my process with a few emails from me. And she had just done that. So when she read my book as a beta reader, she had a lot of, oh, but wait, this part was really confusing to me when I watched your thing. And like, I figured this out later, but it didn't make sense at first. But then what if you could explain it like this? And what if the order was this? So in a lot of ways, because she was just familiar enough with the content, but not an expert, she was able to say, she did more developmental editing than anyone did, because she was like, I know that what I need as a client was this. And it's interesting because you helped me make sure that the general flow was there, and that the punctuation was right, and the formatting was right, and that I wasn't repeating lots of phrases and the case studies. And honestly, there's so many details you do where I'm like, I thought I've learned from you, like the comma goes inside the quote. Like, do you know what I mean? One space after period, not two. Like, I know, right? Like I try so hard to give you a clean copy. I had someone say to me one day, but what do you want Linda to do with it if you're doing all that work? I'm like, I want her to pay attention to the content and not be sitting there fixing my commas. Like
Right.
I have other ways of fixing commas. Like I'm using Grammarly. It's supposed to catch that, right? I'm supposed to be better at writing, but I still, there are tells. There are certain phrases I will fall into, and like someone else has to hear that. I also have learned to play the book to me, like you would read aloud with either Microsoft, or I use I can't remember. I have another tool that I use to listen to it. I need to hear the book because that's where you hear those common phrases, the certain words keep popping up. But I still am not, no matter what else I did, I needed a professional editor. Like you could try to use these other tools. You can use different types of AI. You
Right.
need a human being to like see the book, react to it.
So what I tell people, if you think about it, it's like taking a selfie. Your arm isn't long enough to get a good perspective on what you're doing because you are the
Yes.
author and you've seen it and you've heard it and you've lived it. And that's true of me, of any writer. You need another human being that can reach out beyond you where you can reach to actually look at it from a different perspective. And so that's what an editor does. The other thing, though, I mean, and you talk about this too, is it's important to look at you talk about hearing the book, which I think is really important. But one of the things, I don't know if you've noticed, that when you give me something, I give it back to you and it's in a different font. And you're probably going, why did she change the font? It's because if you've been looking at that font forever, things show up on the page and you just see them. You don't really read them, they kind of appear. So I changed the font, or I changed the size of the font, because now you're looking at it differently. And all of a
I
sudden,
noticed this and I couldn't figure out what happened. I did notice this last time. I was like, huh.
Yeah, I do that because I want you to get out of having seen and worked with it for
Amazing.
months in the same way. I want you to see it differently. Yeah.
Okay, that's really subtle.
Yeah,
I
it's
love it.
subtle, but it's good.
It's really
Well,
good. Um, I had a client launch a book yesterday. She was working with this really well-known and established hybrid publisher, and they do good work. And I asked her about like her. I just had one line in the interview, like, "What was the anything that was surprising to you about your author journey?" And she said it was the rewrites because
mm,
she had written a good book, right? Like she wrote the book, and it was a good book, and then they really put her through the grind of doing the developmental edits, which created a great book. Like maybe it was a good book, but now it's a great book. And she just had no idea of it. There's an emotional piece to it because you have to kind of let go and trust this process, knowing that like the end result is the better looking house. Like maybe you were fine with 3 bedrooms, but it turns out 4 is really what you needed. And that's what you know what I mean? So I feel like you have to have a certain amount of empathy as the person in this role that you have. And the fact that you yourself publish books gives you some of that empathy because you've
yeah.
experienced this on the other end. Talk to me a little bit about the emotional arc that some of your clients go through deciding to write a book, deciding to commit to this process. Maybe they have that crappy first draft. I sent you a subject line that said crappy first draft one time and you were like cracking up. I was like,
It was
this is
not
it.
crappy. It was
I was like,
fine.
this is I'm going to release it to the world and hope for the best. Um, but there's a lot of vulnerable moments, even the second and third time you write a book, but particularly that first time. What are some of the things you're seeing, and how can you coach someone and you're working with them to like kind of step away from the biggest angsty parts and allow this process to unflow?
That's a great question. So, first of all, I presume that you, as the author, know your stuff. You are the expert in this area, right? I mean, I don't work with anyone who's making it up as they go along. You have experience, you know your stuff, um, and you want to tell the world. Okay, so I want to make sure that you're here because you have a good reason. You know, you have something to tell, to share. It's you're going to want to be a speaker. You want to build your consulting business, whatever it is. The one thing I don't want you to say is, gee, I want to be a multimillionaire. I'm going to retire. I'm going to go to Hawaii. I'm going to put my kid through college on the proceeds of this book, because in most cases, it's not going to happen. It's not the book itself that's going to make you rich. It's what the book is going to help you do. So that's important. But secondly, you have all this expertise and you know more about your topic probably than most people on the planet. You can't tell me everything in a book. That's what I see. First time authors want to put everything they know about the topic because all they want to do is educate you and tell you about it, etc. That would be about a 500-page book. And as the reader, I'm going, yikes, I can't deal with that. So, what you need to do is focus on, first of all, who the author really is. And I start out sometimes that authors will say to me, well, it's this audience and that audience and this audience and that audience. And it's kind of like saying, no, you've got to have a primary and a secondary audience. Maybe there's a tertiary audience, but who would really you want to read the book? Because that's who you've got to write it for. Other people pick it up. That's fantastic. But, there's no product on the planet that appeals to everybody, even water, right? There's bubbly water and there's, water with this and water with that and flavor and the whole thing. So no matter what it is, you've got to identify who your market is. And then you write the book saying, what do they need to know? And I start out by helping them say, what is what I call the burning platform? Why are you writing this book? What is so important that you have to get out there? In your case with your upcoming book, people are coming to you and they're writing books and they're not necessarily getting the value from the book. So what you said is if you launch a book using this process, you're going to get more out of it. So you need to that's what you need to understand as an author. You need to understand this process. And if you follow this and you get reviews, good things will happen. So that's number one, is you need to understand why you're doing this, who the audience is, what the value is. And then the next piece is, why are you the best person on the planet to write this book, right? Why are you the right person? Because if there's 50 people out there that have written books on leadership that are somewhat similar to yours, yeah, you may be a good leadership expert, but why would I buy the book? What's unique about what you do? We've seen leadership from the top, the bottom, the inside, outside, backwards, up, forwards. So, there's a gazillion leadership books out there. But, in most cases, we can come back and say, this is why I'm the right person to write the book. I've got this expertise. I've done this before. I can share this with you. And so getting them to kind of think through that is important. And then very often I have to come back and I think it was Faulkner who said you have to kill your darlings, right? Sometimes you have to come back and you have to take all this great content that someone's written and said, this is lovely, but it's too much. We need to cut this whole section out because you're going down this path here and the reader is going to get lost and they're not going to follow you. So there's that emotional piece. Well, I wrote these great words. You did. And if it's not in the book, that's okay because you're going to speak about it. You can use those words in presentations. You can have interviews that you do. You can do podcasts like this and talk about that. You can also you can write articles. You can put bonus content on your website. So it's not like us to throw it away, but you've got to pare the book down to what it's going to sell and what's going to make sense. And people are going to come back and say, that was a great book. And this is what I want to do with it. So that is all kind of an emotional thing sometimes with the
Yeah.
authors, get them through that process. But
Yeah.
they need to see what the other side is.
What I love about how you're grounding them in this is that when they have angsty moments throughout the process, you can keep going back to their own words about why they're doing this, who it's for, the value that's going to be in this book. And at that point, if they make it about themselves and their own angstiness, they're actually going to minimize their impact and they're going to be keeping knowledge from people who need it. And that is not what they're here to do, right? They're not here to do that. So they have to get past that. Like it's sort of saying, like, do you remember why you're doing this? Do you remember the audience that's waiting for you? And that's why the clarity of the who is so important, and imagining the results they're going to get because they follow the process. And then it's like, well, what do they need and not more in the book, right? That's a really big thing. And it's just, I love this. When I was building the Biz Book Pub Hub initially, I didn't set out to create it. I set out to find a referral network that I could join. And I joined various groups of people in publishing. I found a group of people in nonfiction, and I thought, okay, this is going to be my space. And then I realized nonfiction includes memoir, travel, cookbooks, not just businessy type books. And when I was sitting in one of their calls and the host was describing what a lead magnet was, I realized that I was on a call with people who were not business minded and that these weren't really my people. I wanted to find a group of experts who specifically had those strategic conversations with the author at the beginning of the process, and throughout the process checked in. Are we still on that path? Is this still the book we're creating? Because things can change, markets can change, interests can change, whatever. And what you just described would set an author onto the right path more easily. I too often talk to an author who has a book because they were told to write a business card book, and now that they have the book, they're like, well, Robbie, it's not really doing anything for my business. Like, how do I actually use it? And then I'm like, well, tell me about who it's, they're like, it's for everyone. And I'm like, what? Like, did you not do any of these exercises? Like, you got this book out. So kudos to everyone who comes to you for at least getting that level of clarity. Most of the people that come to you, though, are they mostly coming with ideas they're trying to get out of their head? Are they mostly coming with finished products? Like, or is it really a blend? Like, who do you generally attract?
It's a blend because there's some people who come to me. I've had one author I've worked with on a couple of books, and he has a commercial publishing contract. And he's a really smart guy with great ideas, and he knows his writing is fair. It's just not clear, it's not cleaned up the way it should be. And so he gets the contract and he's got this great ideas, but he comes to me and says, Linda, I need help. Just, help me refine this. So it's that piece. And sometimes there's some developmental editing, but it's more of that kind of line editing type of thing to make it clear. And so that's it. And then he goes off, and I never touch it from a production perspective.
Right.
I'm working with an author now who I'm working with a couple of authors now who are getting their first real book, because one has published a book before, but it was not in the same vein. Getting their first real book together. And so it's like, well, I don't know. Do I talk about this? What do I do? And it's in some ways you sort of become the book therapist, because like, well, I thought I was doing okay, but then I looked at what I wrote yesterday and I don't like it. I'll never make it. It's not. It's like, stop. That's not going to help. Let's get this out here. Let's look at it. It's never as bad as you think it is. It's probably never as good, as wonderful as you think it is. We're in the middle. and how do we kind of improve it and get it through here. So it's a combination, which makes my life more interesting, because if all I was doing was just, kind of copy editing and looking for commas and things, that would be boring. So it keeps things going. But I do want to talk a little bit about AI tools, because AI tools are very good when used in the right way. So something like Grammarly is good, but I still go through Grammarly books that have been through Grammarly and say, nope, that's not right. So there's things Grammarly doesn't catch. I'm really wary of things like ChatGPT, Perplexity, Claude, whatever, if you use them to generate content, as opposed to saying, find me a statistic about how many people did this in the year 2023. Okay, and you look at a source, that's fine. That's kind of a more advanced way of Googling that we use today. But I have just heard about there is the Chicago Sun-Times just had a issue about a week ago where they put out their list of summer reads, and it was created by AI, and they were real authors, but the authors hadn't written any of the books. It was all generated by ChatGPT or whatever they used. It was like, oops. But the ChatGPT was good enough that you looked at these titles and said, that author could have written that book, but they didn't. So you've got to be careful about things that are made up. And quotes too, looking for quotes from, putting AI tools for that. Got to be careful, because it's good enough, the technology is good enough to say, this is something that person might have said. I'll write it in the right style. But then you look, and if you actually do some research, you find they never said that. So you can get into trouble. So it's great to use for catching things like grammar. It's great to use if you want to look up statistics, etc. Be very careful when you start to use it for what I would consider actually creating content. And we're starting to see that Amazon and Google and other places are starting to say, was that book created using AI? Because they're starting to push back on things like that.
Yeah, I think I want to draw a distinction, and I actually did some research on this before my fourth book was being written, because AI was not a tool that was available until now for me for writing, because it really became popular while you and I were in this like flurry of activity
That's right.
writing Break Out of Boredom, low tech solutions for highly engaging Zoom events between the end of 22 and the beginning of 23. And I knew ChatGPT was sort of out there, but I was like, no, I'm writing my book. I'm not going to be in the forefront of this. I don't need to do this. And then when I went to publish my book, it was in a very crowded market, because it was a book about technology. And so all the categories were filled with chat prompts, all these books that were created, but they weren't well written. So it was easy for my book to like jump to the top. Now what I've learned is I've been working with it for a while, and it's about my voice and my content. What I think people have to be very, very careful of saying, kind of what you're saying, is if I said, give me 10 challenges faced by leaders who are mid-level managers in a Fortune 500 company. Okay, for the first one, write me a chapter. For this, like you could do this sort of messy, generic, but that's what it'd be. It would be messy, generic platitudes. It would have no substance. You'd have no real life stories. It would sound like it was written by AI, and it's not your original content. It's not your IP. It's not your expertise. Like that is nonsense. So all the people used to say like write your book in a weekend are now talking about write your book in 15 prompts or something. I don't know. Like they're
Yeah.
just like these predatory people. What I was doing was I had a ton of audio transcripts, because I had created a DIY online program for my clients to have reference material while they work with me one-on-one. And so I took all those transcripts and I dumped them in, and I said, create an outline. And it helped me organize all that information. And then I went and I said, okay, get the timestamps off these transcripts. And then I copied and pasted the transcripts into each section. And then I thought, well, this is still kind of messy. And this is the part that I always hated, like cleaning up transcripts. And I said, okay, let me get this down to 4 concepts. Okay, AI, can you pull out the 4 key concepts? Okay, that's right. That's the part that I should have seen, but it was so cluttered. Okay, now I know what I'm looking at. And then I would write. Like, so there was a lot of back and forth. It was like having a little partner be like, no, you missed a spot. Here's the interesting thing that happened. I wanted to say, and I've already had a lawyer point this out to me, if I feed my content to AI, I'm training it on my content. All my books are already on AI. Like there's lawsuits about it. I'm hearing about it. Like, I'm going to use it for myself. I am going to just own my own content in my own way because I own my content because I'm using it. But I put it up there, and you know what AI said to me? You're missing the emotional arc. So AI, that question that I just asked you about, like, where do people feel the most like angst and vulnerability? It was my ChatGPT that said, because I'm all business. I'm like coming at this from this like, here are the things you need to do, right? And then AI is like, well, like this point in the process, they might be feeling something about like, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So then I wrote a whole bunch of stuff about it, and I just thought, what? Like, so if it understands your voice and it understands who you're trying to be, it will make you better at that by pointing out your blind spots, like coaching you. But I didn't say, well, now write me an answer to that problem. I was like, well, let me think about the clients I've worked with. I'm like, well, let's get an example to put in there. Let's reinforce that message. But I don't know. It was a very different writing experience. I don't identify as a writer. I'm at book 4. I don't stress about the process as much as I used to, but it's not like I wanted to stare at a blank page. So like even having an outline and having transcripts to work from, like all of that felt so much better than when I wrote my first book and I just stressed about getting the ideas out of my head, and I had to trick myself into doing it. So I think there's a partnership, but you have to be very careful that it's your content that you're, finessing.
That I think is absolutely the key point of what you just said, which is you're using AI to mine your own content more effectively than you could by yourself, as opposed to saying, go tell me what 10 other people have written about this, or going out there. And that's the difference. That's the difference. And I think Google has something called Notebook, which you fill with your stuff, and it basically trains itself, and it looks and mines your own work to find the most important parts, which is just great. And it's private. It's not then put out on the internet, and it's not training ChatGPT or other tools. I mean, you could do that if you wanted to, but you don't have to. You keep it private. So that's what I would suggest. But then you still need an editor. I don't see editors going away. Just a quick aside. I have a client, a tech client. I've worked with this guy for 3 or 4 different companies. Wonderful guy. And he started a company for software to use AI to build more efficient software tools. And he called me a couple months ago, and he said, well, we're about to launch it, and I need your help. I need you to, work on the website, and I need you to work on the materials for the launch. And I said, you're an AI company. How come you didn't do this with AI? He said, well, we did, but it just came out too blah. It came out too. So he said, we need to put that emotion in, that emotion that ChatGPT was telling you that you needed, or whatever the prompt. He said, we need that. We need a human, because this stuff is just too. We run it through all the AI tools. It's factually correct, and it's boring. So I don't see human editors going away, at least not in my lifetime. Maybe in 50, 100 years, they'll be different. But we still need to have that person, that human that comes through and says, oh, let me look at from my experience. Here's what I think you need to do to make this a better book, being that you're already good at what you do.
Some of the AI tells are there because they're marketing speak.
Yep.
So even if you're not using AI, you should know what these tells are because you might be falling into the trap of doing it. So here's one that I became very aware of while writing this book: the rule of 3. This, and this. And it's like if every chapter, every paragraph has this, and this, it's repetitive, it's boring. One of those 3 things probably isn't needed. Maybe 2 of those 3 things isn't needed.
Maybe there's 4, maybe there's only 2. Yeah.
Right. And so I asked it to actually pull all the rules of 3 in the book. Some were like 3 people's names because they were 3 guests on the show. Well, we're going to keep those. But it made me go back through and look at it from that perspective. I also, as you know, I'm a big fan of M dashes. And I said to you, listen, I want to make sure like some of these should be commas or a colon or a period. Like, I don't want to lean into this crutch. And this is where your understanding of the grammar behind it, the punctuation, flows that better. So it's just, I think that we need to understand like even words. I will tell you a funny moment. So I handed my manuscript off to the formatter like a week ago. And so this is very fresh in my mind. The last day I sliced and diced the book every way I can imagine. So I was listening to it at 2.5 speed for like the second time. And I really was. I noticed the word momentum. Kept coming up. Momentum, momentum, momentum. Now, whether that was the AI crutch or my own crutch or just like a phrasing that was stuck in my head, and I found it 49 times when I did a little search in Word, and then I fixed it down to 15. And then I was like, let me look for other words. And I was like, well, I could just look, or I can ask ChatGPT. And it gave me a list of like the top 50 most used words. Some of them made sense, like launch. It's a book about launches. But then I was like, the word visibility, that's kind of a vague word. Like, where is it needed? When else is it maybe something else? Like momentum sometimes was energy, right? So that last piece, I didn't want to hand it off until I felt like I had massaged it down. Like I'm a visionary, but I can be super in the weeds. And like that day I was looking at every single tree and every leaf and trying to figure out like, do I need this leaf? Is this leaf needed here? And honestly, I knew I was ready to hand it off when I was sick and tired of the book. Like I'm like, I don't want to talk about the book for a week, so I'm going to hand it to the formatter so I don't have to look at it because I'm done.
The other thing I tell clients, and I have to tell you this now too, is you can look at it 1,000 times and you can go over and have it perfect, and you're going to get that book, have that printed book in your hand. You're going to say, oh, I should have changed this. Oh, I missed that. Oh, something. I sent it to the publisher on Monday, and on Thursday something came out and it's not in the book. That's okay. It's okay. This is you have not written the Bible that can't be revised. You're going to have extra content. You're going to talk about it. You're going to say, hey, I published the book and then this came out and I want to tell you about that too. So it's not everything you need to know, and it's not going to be perfect. There's going to be something you're going to find, and that's okay.
I just found in my second book that there's some images that relate to my process. And I just, because I was going to reuse some of those images, realized that one of them was repeated in the wrong order. Nobody noticed. Yeah. I didn't notice. Nobody noticed. No one's talked about it. Now I'm aware of it. It's like this wart that I'm seeing.
It's not such a terrible thing that, that people can say, oh, I don't believe anything he said because the image was in the wrong order.
Right. It's like, Alan Weiss, by the way, because I know he's someone you know really well. Yeah. He came to speak at the National Speakers Association chapter that I belong to. And he is a prolific writer. He's just put out so much content on his topic. And he was just like blatantly, yeah, there's typos. Yeah, of course there are. Like, yeah, there are mistakes, whatever. Yeah. Of course there is.
I've edited some books,
that like permission granted. Like, yeah, of course there is. Like, that's why I have 60 books and you don't have any books because you won't write them and release them. Like you're just so hung up on it being perfect. Like I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. I have to move forward with this process and stop being so precious.
Perfection is the enemy of success. You cannot make it perfect because it's just, the world is changing. If you're writing about something that's antique, you can say this is what happened in the 1800s. That's not the world we're in. So get it out there and it's okay. And somebody will come and probably tell you, I found something on page 7. What Alan will say, did you find the one on page 12 too? So he just takes it in stride.
He really does. So while I was writing and editing and formatting the third book, which is about Zoom, Break Out of Boredom, Low-Tech Solutions for Highly Engaging Zoom Events, Zoom was changing where things were on the website. Yeah. And I had to just make peace with that. Like I wrote a book that had philosophy and strategy, and it taught you about facilitation techniques that were not specific to the technology. It taught you purpose-first design that wasn't tied to where the buttons were. Yes, I also told you where the buttons were, but I told you what buttons to look for. So the buttons might move. You might be on a different platform. Maybe it'll be on Teams. And I think I had to really sit with the fact that I was writing a book about strategy and technique, not a technology book. Because if you get stuck on that, like whatever you're writing about, there's going to be a new thing that comes, and your content may or may not hold up under your own scrutiny 10 years later. And that's still okay. And that's why you might write a second book and a third book and a fourth book. Like that's why you might keep putting out other kinds of content. So kind of want to give permission for folks to do that. I have a question about client success stories. Do you have anything that, you work with someone, maybe they were a little reluctant about doing this. They did it. They booked clients. The book was sold in bulk. They got on stages. Like what are the good positive things that you've seen result from people following a strong process?
So I think probably the biggest success I think is people saying, "Hey, I used the book. I walked in with it, or people saw it, or they ordered it. They maybe only ordered one copy, and I booked a big consulting project." So that's the kind of thing. I don't know that any of the authors outside of, again, I have edited some of Alan's stuff, but Alan has written more books on consulting than anyone on the planet. So he's got his humongous brand and he sells thousands and thousands of books. But your average author, I don't think they're going to make, we won't talk about bestseller lists, but just in terms of huge amounts of sales of books. But the successes are there was one set of authors because it was a group project, and we wrote a book on teams, and they are now getting into places about talking about teams that they weren't getting into before. So that's kind of the success stories. That's the success story. So in some cases, the book gets you into one or two clients, but those clients are the people that you wanted to reach that you couldn't get to before or that weren't paying
Hmm.
attention. It gives you the credibility, and it also gives you something to say, look, in your case, let's look at chapter 4 because this illustration here, this is the process we're going to follow. So all of a sudden you're this published author. And the key point too is when we do books and you produce them all the way through, they don't look like they're self-produced at all, self-published. We use very highly trained professionals, and you can tell from looking at your own books, they look as good as any book, and sometimes better, that came from a commercial publisher. So I don't believe that today people are looking at the spine and going, "Oh, it was from McGraw Hill, or it was from Wiley, or this one. Oh, it wasn't." They don't care. They look at the inside of the book. They look at the content. They say, "This is good." And a publisher today, there's a whole nother presentation we could do on commercial publishing versus self-publishing versus hybrid. So I won't go into all of that there. There's pros and cons, but if you want to get your book out and control it and get things done, just write the book and get it out there. Don't worry about getting to a commercial publisher because you can get the book out there and you can be successful and you can get things from it and it can really change your business.
I think the keys here are knowing what you want the book to do for you and hiring the kind of professionals who create an end product that looks traditionally published, whether or
Yep.
not it is, so
Yes.
that people aren't put off. Like you may have a great message and bad packaging. And I've gotten really sensitive about this. I can tell I can pick up a book in 20 seconds or less. Like I have tells that I'm like, oh, you know, even looking on Amazon, like if the book description's all one clump of text and not broken out with, paragraph breaks and some italics and some bullets, like that's a tell that someone doesn't really know what they're doing. The lack of reviews. I'm like, what
Yeah.
what happened here? It's a book about networking. Like, how come they don't have any reviews? Like, so there are things that I look at both on the physical book, on the way the page looks. And if you work with the right kinds of professionals, you'll avoid these common mistakes and you'll get better results because you'll be leading towards a particular outcome. Speaking of working with great experts, you are a member of the Biz Book Pub Hub. You're one of our partners. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this space. As I mentioned, it's really geared towards these entrepreneurs who are writing books to help them grow their business. What's your experience been like? Why is this kind of space needed, et cetera?
So I think there's a couple things, and I was so glad to see when you put this together because there are a lot of people out there. There's a ton of people that said they will help you with your books, and you're right. The ones that say, print, write the book in 10 minutes, publish it in another five. There's some people out there doing some shady things, and there are people out there that can help you. And the other thing is, there are so many people doing so many different things. How do you know when you need an audiobook? How do you know when you need a voiceover? How do you know when you need someone who just does this type of editing or this type of illustration or whatever? So what you've done is bring these people together. You've vetted them so they're not, shady characters. They've done this before. You've whittled down the number of people. We started out a year or two ago. There were a lot of people there, some of which did this kind of in their spare time. Now you've got people that are really devoted. This is what we do for a business. And so these are the people we can help. And I know if there's something that I don't do or I don't have time for or it's just not a good fit, that I can go find someone else in the hub and say, go talk to them. Or here's two people, go choose the one you like. So I think there's great to have this all available for authors to be able to see this whole range of services they might need. And it's also great for people in the hub, for us to be able to say, here's who I can refer people to. And here's who's someone that maybe I could partner with, and maybe we can help create yet another service that's valuable for authors.
Yeah, I always say if you're a speaker, you got to hang out with other speakers. If you're an author, or want to be an author, you got to hang out with people who are writing books, because some of this stuff you just learn by seeing what other people are doing. You get better referrals from vetted people, not falling prey to a Facebook ad that sounds good.
Exactly.
You also learn, I mean, sometimes the list of possible things that are listed on the directory is a little overwhelming because we try to be really nuanced, but it's also an education. Wow, I didn't know there's a difference of these 3 different types of editors. I didn't know I might need this other thing. Like, you may not, but I want you to know it exists so you can have that moment of like, huh, is this part of my strategy or not? Do I need this service or not? Some people do all the things like you, and some do very specialized skill sets. So I love that the community of authors are supporting each other. The experts are supporting the authors and with each other. I'm a big fan of relationship building. We've got these great community events, so it's been so much fun and a huge experiment, honestly. Building it as we fly the plane, kind of thing, right? Like a year and a half in, to see what it's become has been really neat. And since I only do the launch, I'm really going really far downstream, hosting events for speakers and authors and writers who don't yet even have the book, because one day, hopefully not too soon,
So yeah,
they'll have
so
a book, and then you'll refer them to me and I can help them actually achieve that launch result that they hope for. And they'll be in a better position to do it because you've asked them the right questions. So it's like, I feel better about the kind of clients I'm getting because I know they've gone through a process with you. So for me, it's been wonderful to both refer people to folks like you who have the idea, but it's stuck in their head, and for them, a year later to come back to me with a book. And they're excited because we have these Kindle flash sales 3 times a year. And I
mhm.
have a client who saw me do that the first one at the end of 23, and she couldn't participate and was like, "Oh, I need to write the book." And all last year, she was like, "Oh, you're doing it again? Ah, I need to write the book." And then this year she got to participate in it because she had the book. And I'm
Yeah,
like, wow, like we were part of her journey of helping her get to the finish
that's
line
great. That's
as a
fantastic.
marketing ploy. So, how can our listeners find you and follow your work? You've got so many great, valuable resources.
Great, thank you. Well, first of all, connect with me on LinkedIn, and you've got my name here, so just connect with me there. I'd love to hear from people. My website is Leverage2Market, Leverage, the number 2market.com, and there's resources there. I'm on Facebook. You can follow me there. I'm not really on Instagram or TikTok or any of that because I focus on LinkedIn, which is really the business platform. But reach out. You can email me, linda@popky.com. Would love to chat with you. I'm happy to chat with authors and spend a few minutes just kind of helping you figure out where you are in the process, and would love to hear from you.
We're going to put all these links, including your Biz Book Pub Hub partner profile link and your book link, all on the website at bizbookpubhub.com, which is you can find all the show notes. We have episodes coming out every Tuesday and Thursday. So much great content from these author panels, our expert interviews, our author interviews. And when you get a chance, you can also check out our monthly virtual networking events that we have for speakers and authors, and these Kindle flash sales that happen 3 times a year. So whether you're buying books or selling one of your books, we want to help you do that. Head over to bizbookpubhub.com. And Linda, thank you so much for this conversation.
Oh, my pleasure. This was fun, Robbie, and I'm looking forward to seeing that new book
I love it.
soon, soon,
Me
soon.
too.